The Smurg by Jessiy. Read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 4. The next day, Hermione walked along the lane in Little Hingleton, dreading what she would find at the Gaunts. Dumbledore wasn't the only one who said that they were nasty pieces of work. As she turned into the hidden walk that led to their home, she froze. The shack was dilapidated. An air of neglect suffocated the whole property that gave the shrubbery a wildness that resembled her hair during third year. But the thing that shocked her the most was the snake nailed to the rough-hewn door. She quickly ducked behind the hedges as she heard the pebbles crunch under a newcomer's foot out on the lane that passed by the shack. At the same time, a window slid open overhead, and Hermione saw a faded girl with clumped, dirty hair and dark eyes. She was hanging out the window, a desperate longing contorting her face. It was obvious that she was watching whoever it was on the road. Hermione would bet everything she owned that Merope was watching Tom Riddle Sr. There was a loud, resounding bang from inside the house, and all Hermione could make out was hissing. Parseltongue. She shivered. This must be where it all started. With a crackle of power, she watched as Morphin knocked Merope out from in front of the window before casting a jinx at the passerby. Pushing through the hedge, she saw a tall, darkly handsome man break out in large, painful patches of hive. Tom began to scratch brutally before picking up the pace and heading home at a near trot. Merope was sobbing, but stopped suddenly as a flashy smack filled the air. Hermione saw red. Perhaps if she had waited and sorted out the situation and went to the door calmly, things would have been different, but she didn't. She blasted the door off the hinges, startling a bad-tempered grisly man that she assumed was Mervolo Gaunt. A father that was ignoring the abuse happening from above. It made her sick. "What do you want?" he demanded. One pointed at her, ready to fling curses. "Get the hell out of my way," she snarled, non-verbally disarming and freezing him as she went. Not one twinge of unease soured her stomach as he left him there, frozen, his wand in her pocket. She flew through the house, vengeance and justice on her mind. When finally she flung open the door to the room where the siblings were, Hermione narrowed her eyes. "Stupefy!" Hermione yelled, casting the spell unnecessarily strong. The man, Morphin no doubt, was knocked into the wall behind him, sliding down the sheetrock in a crumbled heap. She walked over to a cowering Merope and gentled her fierce expression. Merope was dirty. Her eyes were divergent strabismus, and the effect of her eyes looking in opposite ways was extremely off-putting. Hermione reached out to touch Merope's shoulder, but was taken aback when the young woman flinched. Withdrawing her hand, she squatted so that Merope could see her. Or so she hoped. "I'm not here to hurt you. In fact, I want you to come with me. I wouldn't feel right about leaving you here with them." Hermione smiled sadly, voice tempered to soothing tones Jean Granger had used on her when she was at her most capricious as a child. "I don't want to," Merope said in a terrified whisper. It broke Hermione's heart. "Why not?" "They are my blood." "So what? You will be Merope Gaunt no matter where you are. You deserve to be treated better than this." "No." Her voice shook, tears squeezing out of her newly clenched eyes. "What is the real reason?" "I love him." "I'm going to go out on Olympia and assume you are talking about Tom Riddle and not that trash." Hermione gestured to the unconscious man against the wall. "If you are that serious about him, I will help you try and catch his attention. Trust me, I have done harder things than that." "You don't think I'm a blood traitor?" she gasped. Hermione could see her wide eyes silently begging her to be honest, tears making dirty tracks down her face. "No, I don't think you're a blood traitor. I don't know what you like about Tom Riddle, but I won't judge you for it. Will you come with me?" Merope nodded her head empathetically. "Gather your things, we're going to the Leaky," Hermione said with an encouraging smile. "Mobile corpus," Hermione muttered at Morphin's unconscious body and moved him from his position crumpled against the wall. She got a sick sense of justice as she watched his head bang into the newel post and each baluster on the way down the stairs. She laid his unconscious body next to the door at her father's feet. In a complete turn of events, Bob Ogden stared at her, shocked from the doorway at the four occupants in open-mouthed confusion. Hermione spotted him and turned the full force of her smile on his unsuspecting ministerial mind. "I am Hermione Slytherin, And if you wish for a witness to testify against Morphin for using magic on a muggle, I would be more than happy." She smiled. Merope stood off the side uncomfortably and watched as Hermione took the ring off of Marvolo's finger and thrust it at his daughter. Hermione unfroze the man and twirled his wand in her fingers as the ministry employee watched from the doorway. "I promise to take amazing care of your daughter, sir, and in return she will take care of the family heirlooms. If you try to fight me on this, I will decimate you. If you need to find us, don't." She glared coldly at Marvolo before taking Merope's arm, smiled sweetly at Bob Ogden, and apparated the two of them away. Hermione took them to Diagon Alley, where she immediately took Merope up to the room Hermione had led. She handed her a towel and a flannel. "All the soap is already in the bathroom. Take as long as you want. I always enjoy a nice soak at the end of a stressful day." Hermione encouraged the shy woman. Imagine that, Merope gaunt, shy. Hermione shook her head. Perhaps she should think about buying a small house for them to live in. Shaking her head, she decided to wait. After all, if history repeated itself, Merope would be married to Tom within the next 6 months. Once Merope was out of the bath, Hermione ordered them both supper, and they sat down at a small table that graced the room. "What do you like to do with your life now that you're free?" Hermione asked. "I like potions," Merope blushed. "I do too. If you could do anything, what would it be?" "Marry Tom," Merope whispered, her pale face flushed with embarrassment. "You're not going to dose him with a love potion, are you?" "Just long enough so that he would see me." "No, Merope, you can't just use a love potion. For Merlin's sake, try the Imperius first." "This is unforgivable," she whispered, scandalized. "I won't tell if you don't. Plus it's only Sir Tom, right? Much better than a love potion." "I'm better at patience." "And what happens if you get pregnant while he is dosed? What are the side effects?" "There are none." "How about this? We try the old-school method." "Kidnapping?" Hermione looked at Merope with a shocked sort of concern, despite already suggesting an unforgivable herself. "No," Hermione said slowly. "Let's try and get him attracted to you. I can fix your appearance and your manners. Let's start with that." "Oh," Merope said worriedly, "I'm not going to make him fall in love with me that way." "I think you would be surprised. Would you give me 2 weeks?" "All right," Merope said. "Oculus Scenaret." Hermione suddenly pointed her wand at the startled Merope. Her dark eyes centered and her vision cleared. Intelligence burned within. Merope gasped and ran into the bathroom, shrieking in amazement at Hermione's spell. Hermione smiled ruefully. That spell wouldn't be invented for another 50 years, and even then, it rarely would be used by anyone who wasn't a master of eye care. Too many things could go wrong. Hermione had studied the theory once, thinking she could heal Harry's eyes, but was quickly dissuaded. The world couldn't abide a blind Harry Potter. She was just lucky that her first attempt turned out so well, not that Merope ever needed to know how close she came to being blinded instead. In this case, she decided to bite the bullet. If Merope ended up blind, then she did her job. Merope wouldn't be able to make a love potion if she were blind. Hermione sat back in her chair and gave herself a mental pat on the back. The smug look didn't even leave her face for the rest of the night. Hermione was excited. It was finally Saturday, and she was looking forward to the duel with Dumbledore. She was going to learn so much from him. She just knew it. She smiled. The entire week had dragged by at a glacial and painful pace. Hermione was never a big one for girly stuff, but she needed to help Merope gain confidence, and to do that, she found herself mimicking the very things Parvati and Lavender used to do in the girls' dorms. They shopped, pampered themselves, and did all manners of girly things. It was enough to make Hermione hide in the bathroom feigning stomach problems for longer than strictly necessary. And if there was a book in there that kept her busy while pretending to be sick, she would claim it a coincidence. Surprisingly, once the dirt and grime had been washed off of Merope, she turned out to be quite beautiful. Not to stop all traffic and cause accidents kinds, but she had an unusual face that lit up when she talked about things that she was passionate about. Hermione was pleasantly surprised to notice that Merope was of unusually high intelligence. Hermione surmised that Voldemort had to get it from somewhere. They walked to the gates of Hogwarts while Merope danced around the curly-haired witch with glee. She had been homeschooled and was ecstatic to finally see Hogwarts for herself. Hermione smiled indulgently at her. In the few days that they had spent together, Hermione had become increasingly aware of an uncomfortable truth. Regardless of their closeness and age, Moreau treated Hermione like an older sister or a surrogate mother. This was an unexpected consequence, but she decided to shoulder the burden. Would that make her Voldemort's aunt? Quasi-grandmother? What an unsettling thought. Hermione approached the Quidditch pitch with mounting apprehension as the noise of hundreds began to reach her. When she turned the final bend and caught sight of the Quidditch pitch, a deep well of anger rose within her. The stands were completely full. It seemed as if the whole school and more turned out for the unusual event. Hermione glared daggers at Dumbledore, who was standing in the middle of the pitch, twirling his wand agitatedly. Slowly, Hermione walked towards him, leaving Moreau to find a seat among the crowd alone. "I didn't know you would tell the whole school," Hermione accused him, her hair whipped around her face. "It was the damn nosy portraits," he mumbled, his cheeks flushing a red cherry. Hermione looked around and for the first time noticed that it wasn't only students who packed the spectator boxes. "The Ministry, really? What the bloody hell, Dumbledore?" "This isn't my fault," he insisted. "We will lay blame later. Right now, I'm interested to see how fare against you. Might as well get this party started." "Shouldn't I be the one to see how I fare against you?" Dumbledore twinkled. Hermione chuckled. She put her anger down with a steel will as anticipation took its place. She was going to duel Dumbledore in his heyday, a mere 20 years before he rises to defeat Grindelwald. They turned their backs on each other and paced out the required steps. A hush went over the crowd as they watched the beginnings of history in the making. At 200 paces, the duo turned and faced each other, bowing at the waist. Hermione smothered a giggle as Dumbledore dropped into a ridiculously flamboyant dueling stance. Was he screwing with her? She widened her stance minutely, preparing herself to move. Maybe this was his way of throwing her off guard. If it was working. Hermione, being a Battle-Worn veteran that she was, waited until he made the first move, watching to see the fluidity of his casting. She frowned as he sent his first spell, non-verbally. A simple stunner that she easily deflected. Maybe he was just warming up. He had looked smug as he sent the next 3 spells in rapid succession. The last clearly meant to be the one that took her down. It wasn't. She barely even moved. One step back and the spell hit the grass at her feet. She hadn't even cast yet. Hermione was thinking furiously. This was not her Albus Dumbledore. This Dumbledore was powerful. That was easy to tell, however. It was like he had little actual experience. It seemed as if he was a man who had little chance to defend his life or the life of another. She surmised that the only real duel he had been in so far was the one against Grindelwald when Ariana died. Perhaps against someone who hadn't spent the last few years engaged in fierce battle, he would have won easily. Hermione knew he dueled in a multi-nation tourney several times over the course of his life. She just couldn't remember exactly when they took place. She deflected every spell he sent her way, her face falling openly into disappointment. He watched her with a perplexed frown and began casting stronger, harder spells. He quickly lost the light, teasing disposition in lieu of something more serious. A pit in Hermione's stomach opened up at the vast distance between the skills Dumbledore had and those he needed to learn threatened to choke her. It was this that pushed her over the edge, as anger and betrayal poured out of her. Hermione made her first move. "Expelliarmus, stupefy!" She cursed rapidly. She watched as he flicked them away and smiled as she next unleashed a torrent of borderline dark spells, courtesy of one Severus Snape. Spells that had yet to be invented. Of course, had she not been so upset at Dumbledore, she wouldn't have taken so much pleasure in watching him struggle to stay on his feet. As it was, serving him charms had nicked him in a few places, and his blood stained his silk robe. Then she began to move, casting non-verbal spells in increasingly difficult patterns. She began forcing him to respond in the way she wanted him to. She was teaching Albus Dumbledore how to duel as if his life depended on it. Because one day it could save his life. It could save all of their lives. She pushed him around the pitch easily, almost toying with him, and her casting got steadily nastier, which took more work on his part to deflect. His body jerked, unused to exercise, but she was happy to see the arrogance fall from his face and his eyes narrowed. Determination made him strong, and that would be to the benefit of all wizardkind. Hermione smirked. He was surely going to be sore later. Dumbledore had tiny rivers of sweat and blood streaming down his face, forcing him to use valuable time that he could be casting to wipe it. Casting and deflecting wasn't his biggest problem, Hermione decided. It was the fact that she moved around, forcing him to do the same, and he wasn't as able. Then again, she fought in a war that pitted grown and powerful witches and wizards against school-aged children. She couldn't really blame him for his inadequacies. It wasn't his fault that he grew up without war. Hermione clenched her teeth as a few of his spells landed, opening wounds of her own. He was getting better. Maybe at another time they could train together, work on dueling, and have fun doing it. They were peers now, after all. She decided to end it, knowing there wasn't much more that could be done here until Dumbledore was trained. Ropes shot from the tip of her wand. She followed that by transfiguring her bracelet into a set of magical retard manacles that Azkaban frequently used on its more illustrious patrons. Albus avoided the ropes, only to be caught with the manacles, stopping his casting in its tracks. He struggled in vain as Hermione began wrapping him in grey mist that solidified into an iron cage. He struggled against his bonds, trying to force his way out, an incredulous look on his face. "I have never seen anyone duel like that," he said. His voice echoed in the stands. Their audience had gone silent as soon as Hermione began to move. Hermione moved so that they were mere feet apart and lowered her voice, wanting to keep their conversation private. The spectators went even quieter as they strained to hear the conversation that was happening in front of them. "That is obvious. I dueled this way because I fought in a war and I came out the conquering hero. In the end, I suppose I won by default, since I was one of the last combatants standing. I learned to aim for the kill to completely disable my opponent. If I allowed my enemies a second chance to fight, someone I love could die. I learned that the hard way too. Loss to me means death. Either mine or someone that I need to protect, and failed. I have come too far, fought for too long to die now. I took it easy on you. I did not aim to kill. You aim to impress, but Albus, I am not impressed." "What happened to you? You can't be any older than 25. He was horrified as he realized that her bitterness stemmed from war. "I'll be 21 soon." "Merlin's so young," he whispered aghast. "You look disappointed in my skills. Why?" Hermione could tell that he was embarrassed and extremely impressed with her. "Because I expected so much more from you." "I am the undefeated world dueling champion," he said, not understanding that the title meant nothing if it didn't translate to competency on the battlefield where it really mattered. "I guess I could say that I'm undefeated as well, but the difference is, your arena is exactly this, easy and non-threatening, and mine is the bloody graves of everyone I have ever loved. I'll see you next time, Albus." Hermione walked off the field, releasing Dumbledore from his iron prison and manacles, letting them revert back to her bracelet. Hundreds of eyes followed her as she left the Quidditch pitch, head held high, her bracelet in Dumbledore's white-knuckled grasp. Merope caught up with her quickly. Neither one spoke as Hermione took Merope's hand and apparated them back diagonally. Merope watched as Hermione busied herself in their room, a worried frown on her face. She had heard every word of the conversation between the two duelists at Hogwarts. So what if she had put a bug in Hermione's robes before they left? She didn't want to miss anything. The moment they entered their shared room, Merope turned on Hermione, finger pointed accusingly at her. "Why did you save me?" she asked Hermione suddenly. Hermione, considering her answer before slowly shutting the door, turning to face Merope with a grimace, still ignoring the finger pointed at her. "You were being abused." "I know that. But how did you know that? Why were you at my father's house in the first place?" Hermione started, gulping before clearing her throat and continuing. I know things that haven't happened yet." "You want me to believe you're a seer? Don't make me laugh. I think I know you better than that by now. You're from the future. It is the only thing that makes sense. And if that is true, then why save me? What is so important about me?" Her eyes widened as something suddenly occurred to her. "No, Merope, you can't just use a love potion. For Merlin's sake, try the Imperius first." She quoted back the exact words Hermione had said to her only days earlier. "What have you conceived? You don't know what the side effects could be. You know something. What side effects are there?" "I don't," Hermione began, avoiding Merope's eyes. Hermione thought quickly, trying to imagine what could possibly get her out of this conversation.
"Don't lie to me!"
Merope yelled, her face flushed with anger. Hermione finally looked at her and saw the same expression that twisted Tom Riddle's face right at the end. Derision, confidence, and fury. It was this expression that decided her. She would be honest with Merope. Your son will not be able to give nor receive love. It's a side effect of being conceived under the effects of amortentia. As a result, he does terrible things. He will start the bloodiest war in history. He will murder, brutalize, torture, twist, and degrade the entire wizarding community. He is the reason why I'm so good at dueling. He is the reason I watched everyone I loved die. If I can change this one thing, maybe, just maybe, I won't have to watch as my friends are killed in the most horrific ways.
Why didn't I do anything about it?
You died giving birth to him.
But I didn't have you then.
Exactly.
Well, Hermione, let's see if we have to restore to using the Imperius Curse.
She winked before retreating to the bathroom. Hermione stood bemused and a little shell-shocked. Merope could change her moods at a drop of a hat. She was beginning to realize that Merope Gaunt was one heck of an ally. Maybe Hermione didn't need Dumbledore after all. For the first time since she arrived in the 20s, Hermione felt overwhelming hope and relief. Maybe, just maybe, everything would turn out all right. A light tapping on the window disturbed Hermione from her thoughts. Looking suspiciously at the owl, she let it in and untied the scroll that was bound to the owl's leg. Once she unfurled it fully and saw Dumbledore's signature at the bottom, she snorted, eyes flicking back to the top. She noticed the owl stayed, probably expecting a speedy reply and possibly a treat. She dug one out of her pocket and handed it to the grateful bird. My dearest Hermione, I have something of the gravest importance to discuss with you. Please consider meeting me at the Hogshead Inn, Hogsmeade Village, at your earliest convenience. I'm eagerly awaiting your response. Professor Albus Dumbledore. Hermione blinked rapidly. Dearest? What the hell was going on? She turned the parchment over and hastily scribbled her response, too curious to turn him down. 6 p.m. tonight. Make sure there are no spectators this time, or I leave. H.S. Hermione quickly attached a note to the owl and watched as it soared through the open window. She was still in equal parts furious and flabbergasted at Dumbledore's temerity. She didn't tell anyone, except Merope, about their upcoming duel, and yet the whole place was packed. That was on him, and she would not make it easy on him either. Someone needed to teach him what he would need to know to survive against Grindelwald. Suppose she was as good as any candidate. She needed to make him think and consider his each and every move. She intended on making him into the general that he would need to be in case the plans didn't pan out, and Tom was born a monster despite her efforts.
Okay, Hermione, are you ready to go? Let's see if I can catch a man.
Merope winked at her again.
Why not?
Hermione shrugged, starting to get used to being bossed around by Merope and blindsided by her abrupt mood changes. How Harry and Ron would laugh at the contradiction if they knew. She found someone bossier than she. They would never let her live it down.
You are not wearing that, are you?
Merope sneered at Hermione's dress, just as Hermione reached for the doorknob. Hermione looked down at the knee-length loose grey dress that she was wearing. It was not the black number that she wore on her arrival, but it was rather flattering. What was she supposed to wear instead? What's wrong with this? I'm not the one who needs to catch his eye, Hermione grumbled as Merope pushed her into the bathroom and handed her a white and gold flapper dress on the hanger.
Try this,
Merope said. In the time that they were living together, it became apparent to anyone who saw them where the fashion sense of the two came from. It wasn't Hermione. Hermione still took inspiration from clothes she had seen in Narcissa Malfoy's closet when she lived with Malfoy at his manor. Which was fine, but there was something about it that didn't quite fit the time. Merope, on the other hand, was like a blossoming flower. With confidence and care, she had come into her own, taking to the fashion world with a zeal that was nearly infectious. Nearly.
I am not wearing this,
Hermione screeched from the bathroom.
Oh, yes, you are. Come out here so I can fix your hair.
I don't want to look like Lavender Brown.
I don't know who that is. Even if I did, I wouldn't care. Come out.
Merope smiled as Hermione's bitchy face preceded her body from the bathroom.
You look gorgeous, darling,
Merope gushed. Hermione looked down and ran her hands over the elaborate beading that covered the entire thing. The dress was stunning, but just made Hermione uncomfortable. It really was not her cup of tea. She would rather wear something in a darker color and a little less revealing. Merope ignored her protest and pushed her down into the chair. With the tap of her wand on Hermione's head, a low chignon formed at the back of her neck. Hermione sighed in resignation. Merope could be really bossy sometimes. Perfect! Merope exclaimed, before looking in the mirror and patting her own hair one last time before threading her arm through Hermione's and pulling her out the door. Hermione barely had enough time to grab the beaded bag that she carried everywhere. Merope kept a tight grip on Hermione's arm and glared at anyone who dared approach them. Something about the ferocity of the glare made Garrett Privet take a step back. When the girl stepped out of the leaky, it was obvious he was praising his good fortune. Now he was happy to let them alone for now. He watched from afar with the rest of the nobility that was held at bay. Once they reached the apparition point, the girls turned with a low crack, landing in a hedge just outside of the Riddle property. The family was hosting a gala that night, with friends and acquaintances milling around as they waited for the dancing to begin. This allowed the two young women to slip in without the use of magic unnoticed. Hermione uncharacteristically giggled, the unexpected rush from gate crashing making her giddy. They didn't go unnoticed for long, for as soon as they entered the ballroom, Hermione bumped into Tom. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "Not at all, miss." "Granger." They were in the Muggle world, so it would be better to use a real name, right? "I don't remember you being on the list," he said quietly, his eyebrows raised imperiously. In all honesty, he kind of reminded her of Percy Weasley. "My sister and I heard about this party, and we wanted to meet you." Hermione vaguely wondered if flattering him would make him forget that they may not have been invited. He smirked at her and lazily leaned against the mantel of the fireplace. "You didn't have to go to such lengths to procure admittance. I would have immediately issued an invitation to such a lovely woman and her sister." Hermione's eyes went wide. Was he flirting with her? She looked around quickly and spotted Merope and pulled her to her side. "This is my sister, Merope." "That's an unusual name, Miss Granger," he said as he kissed Merope's knuckles, making her blush. Merope gave Hermione a major side-eye, but rolled with the new surname. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said. "The pleasure is all mine." He had a glint in his eyes that Hermione didn't quite like, but kept her own counsel. He had flirted with her, that was true, but once he met Merope, it was obvious which one of them he preferred. It wasn't that Hermione was upset at their development. Quite the opposite. She was starting to think Tom was creepy. A creepy womanizer. Hermione sighed. At least they probably wouldn't have to use the Imperious Curse on him, as long as Merope didn't mind having a one-night stand. She cradled a drink she pulled off of a passing tray and wondered why Merope liked him. The only thing going for him was his looks, and that didn't rate very high in Hermione's box. After an hour of watching the two of them dance and flirt outrageously, Hermione pulled Merope aside. "I have to meet Albus in 10 minutes. Let's go," Hermione implored. "I'll be fine here. You go. I'll meet you at the leaky." "No, Merope, that's a terrible idea." "I will be fine." "Don't use magic on him," Hermione whispered frantically as Merope walked away back into Tom Riddle's arms on the dance floor. Hermione was not happy with the development and decided that if Merope wasn't back at the leaky by the time she was done with her meeting, she would come back and drag the girl away by any means necessary. With a last look of regret, Hermione walked out of the house and into the graveyard below. This is where Cedric died. Or would die, maybe, if Hermione didn't change things. Sealing herself, she apparated to Hogsmeade and made her way to Hogshead. It didn't even occur to her to change her clothes beforehand, but she soon regretted not thinking about it, as the pure-blooded wizards she passed were nearly salivating at the sight of Hermione in her finery. She thought Boyle were annoying when she wasn't deemed an appropriate match, but this was bordering on ridiculous. She wished she could embrace her Muggle-born heritage and scare them all away, but that would be counterproductive to her aims. She would just have to get used to the attention from the men of the high social circus. She grimaced with distaste. She pushed through the door of the inn, easily recognizing Albus' worried frown at the table in the corner. It was not a usual occurrence that a woman would saunter into a man's domain, and the most unsavory characters of the wizarding world leered at her from their shadowy booth, taking in her elegantly swathed body. She ignored them all and slid into the chairs across from Dumbledore. bee in your bonnet?" she asked, visibly startled as she spoke, making her raise a brow in question. He chuckled to himself before meeting her eyes. "Just thinking." "Anything I should be worried about?" "I would like to proposition you." Hermione looked shocked and blinked rapidly. She may or may not have puked a little in her mouth. "Sir, I'm very flattered, but I'm not sure that is—" "No, you misunderstand," he chuckled. "You know about Grindelwald and how he is gaining grounds and followers, starting a war that he positively should never have started? I'm being pressured into meeting him in combat. I don't know how much longer I can hold out before I am painted in the same light as him. Already the prophet calls me immoral and reprehensible." "What do you want from me?" "I want you to hunt him down." "That would irrefutably change the timeline." "Isn't that your goal?" "I suppose, but I can't. Like I said, I have a mission here that does not involve Grindelwald." "Name your terms." "You have to be kidding me. You were a Gryffindor, and Gryffindors don't run from a fight out of cowardice," Hermione stated. "Not all Gryffindors are equally brave." "True, but you can do this. I've lived in the world in which you won. You don't need me." "I don't have to relive certain events. The very worst day of my entire life would be front and center with him. Can you not understand?" he implored. She could. She knew exactly why he was avoiding this, but she was too kind to say. "Here's the thing. I have to ensure that Merope's son has a good life, that he isn't conceived under a love potion, even if it means implementing the use of the Imperious Curse. Her son has the potential to destroy everything that I love. He is my mission. It is more important than your feelings. I'm sorry, but I cannot help you." "I will do it." "Do what?" she asked, exacerbated. "I will make sure he has a good life, I swear it. I will do everything possible, even marry the girl if needs be. I will be an amazing father to the boy, if only you agree to hunt Grindelwald. Honestly, I don't think it will be that hard. You are smart, beautiful, connected, wealthy, and most of all, powerful. You are his holy grail. You will find that he will approach you whether you like it or not." "Let me get this straight. You want to play house while I chase a power-hungry German psychopath? I don't see what's in it for me." "How very Slytherin, Miss Slytherin." He deadpanned, his lips thinned in disapproval. "You don't get it. My only reason for coming back to this time is Tom. I cannot, will not, abandon that. Grindelwald is your problem, not mine." "I will make the boy my heir." "Excuse me?" "The boy. I will make him a Dumbledore. I will make an unbreakable vow if only you will say yes." "I can't, because in the end Merope will be his mother, and I will not barter her away for any prize. Her life is her own to live," she said. "The offer still stands until I am forced into action. Please consider carefully." He fled the inn, a single gold galleon left spinning on the table in his wake. Hermione was shocked at his emotional and hasty departure. It seemed that either one or the other is always leaving in a hurry. Hermione couldn't believe it. Was Dumbledore that afraid to duel Grindelwald? Hermione hit her forehead on the wood surface, groaning at the impossible situation. If Dumbledore adopted Tom, everything would change. Hermione shook her head, her curls danced on the table. Merope wasn't even pregnant yet, for goodness sake, let alone the outcome of any possible relationship, although she didn't have many hopes in that area. Tom Riddle was a flirt, and if her hunch was right, he really liked to love them and leave them. She didn't want Merope to get hurt, but the girl would find out in her own time if Tom was worth it. Nodding her head in acceptance, Hermione made her way out of the pub, still attracting attention in her ornate dress. She was walking slowly through the winding streets of Hogsmeade, thinking about Albus Dumbledore and his proposal. Was meeting Grindelwald so traumatic for him that he would make an offer for a woman he didn't know, that he has never met, to father her bastard child? Who does that? Hermione was dragged out of her reverie when someone slammed into her, causing her to fall to her bum. "I am so sorry, miss." Hermione looked up at the hand extended to her. She followed the sleeve up the line of his body and met bright blue eyes. Her heart stopped. She didn't think it was fate nor an accident that Gellert Grindelwald bumped into her especially so close to the place of her meeting with Dumbledore was held. His eyebrows raised as he waited for her to take his hand. She couldn't tear her eyes away from his striking features. Slowly she reached up to him and pulled her to her feet. With a wave of her wand, she cleaned the dress that Merope had forced her to wear, not wanting to hear Merope scold her for ruining the thing. She could tell that he was waiting for her to give him her name, but she kept silent, not knowing how she should approach things. "I am Gellert, and you are?" he said, good humour suffusing his face. "Hermione." If he wasn't going to give her his last name, neither was she. "Aren't you a wanted man, Gellert?" "Ah, Hermione. Such a lovely name," he murmured as he flipped the hand he still had in his grasp and planted a kiss on the pulse point of her wrist, ignoring her GB at being hunted by the ministries of every country. Her heart began to beat furiously, and her breath came a little too fast. She had heard that he had been charismatic once, but she was wholly unprepared for how that would affect her. She wasn't one who usually concentrated on the way a person looked, but she couldn't stop herself from staring. She watched as the corners of his eyes crinkled. Coming back to her senses, Hermione pulled her hand out of his and looked away, blushing fiercely. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Gellert, but I'm in a bit of a hurry." Hermione lied and turned to leave, but was stopped by his hand on her arm. He reached for her the moment she had turned away. This was not her circus, not her monkeys. She kept repeating the phrase as if it were her new mantra. "Have a drink with me," he said. "Please?" "I can't," she said as she pulled out of his grasp and hurried down the lane. She looked back to see Gellert watching her with a half smile on his lips and a predatory look in his eyes. She went back around, and once she decided she had gone far enough away, Hermione apparated back to the Riddler's grounds, hoping that Merope was still there and that she hadn't gotten into any trouble. She took a moment to relax. It was unsettling that of all people she could have possibly met, Grindelwald had been there and had made sure that she met him. Straightening her shoulders, she walked back to the Riddle's mansion, leaving her chance encounter with a certain handsome revolutionary behind her. The party was still going strong, and Hermione slipped in unnoticed. She walked from room to room, but still couldn't find Merope or Riddle. She paused at the foot of the winding staircase and debated whether she should resume her search above. To do so would run the risk of seeing something that she really didn't want to see. It also could be that Merope wasn't up there. Perhaps she went home to wait for Hermione to get back from her meeting with Dumbledore. But maybe she was up there in his room, with Riddle. Hermione's stomach sank, and she set her left foot on the bottommost stair.
"Can I help you?"
A high-pitched, feminine voice asked from over her shoulder, so close that Hermione could feel the disapproval as if it were a sharp knife pressed into her back. "I'm looking for my sister." Hermione slowly turned around, shoving the uncomfortable feelings of being caught in the act of doing something she wasn't supposed to do, despite knowing she had done nothing wrong other than search for Merope and attempt to go upstairs.
"And who, might I ask, is your sister?"
the woman said with a sneer. Her lips curled back in time, true Snape fashion, and Hermione was momentarily taken aback. "Her name is Merope. She has brown hair and brown eyes, about this tall." Hermione gestured to a height slightly above her own. The longer she talked, the more narrowed the eyes of the woman got. Hermione was starting to suspect that she was Tom Riddle's mother, and it didn't take long for her to trail off into silence.
"I don't know of anyone with that description that was invited,"
the woman said derisively.
"Perhaps you should leave."
"Fine." Hermione's eyes flushed. The snippy scorn that so easily dripped from this woman's demeanor was making her see red. All of the awkward guilt that had filled her at being caught left. She was sick and tired of being treated like a second-rate citizen. First because she was a muggle-born, and now because she wasn't high enough on the muggle social ladder. She was over it. "If something has happened to her while she was here, I'm going to hold this entire family responsible," Hermione hissed, leaving the rude woman behind and walking out the door. She barely made it to the dark hedges on the lane before apparating to the leaky. She was so mad. She could feel herself gearing up for a tirade. She stomped up the stairs, flung open the door to the room, and stopped in her tracks. Merope and Tom were on the bed, presumably naked but covered by a single sheet, both fast asleep. Hermione backed out of the room and shut the door quietly. She stood staring at the wood grain of the closed door, and wondered if maybe she was in over her head. Suddenly, all of their planning felt like a horrible idea. Hermione walked back down to the innkeeper and requested a second room, mumbling about being unable to share the bathroom for a moment longer. It was time to start looking for a place, regardless of whether Moreau would be there with her in the future or not. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Smurg by Jessiy, read by Ella Max Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, AO3, Instagram, or Tumblr.